I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Stanford Prison Experiment. According to Wikipedia, quote, "The Stanford Prison Experiment was a psychological experiment conducted in August 1971. It was a 2-week simulation of a prison environment that examined the effects of situational variables on participants' reactions and behaviors." Stanford University psychology professor Philip Zimbardo led the research team who administered the study. Participants were recruited from the local community with an ad in the newspaper offering $15 a day to male students who wanted to participate in a, quote, psychological study of prison life, end quote. Volunteers were chosen after assessments of psychological stability and then randomly assigned to being prisoners or prison guards. Critics have questioned the validity of these methods. Those volunteers selected to be guards were given uniforms specifically to de-individuate them, and they were instructed to prevent prisoners from escaping. The experiment officially started when prisoners were arrested by real Palo Alto police. After the following 5 days, psychological abuse of the prisoners by the guards became increasingly brutal. After psychologist Christina Mashlak visited to evaluate the conditions, she was upset to see how study participants were behaving, and she confronted Zimbardo. He ended the experiment on the 6th day. SPE has been referenced and critiqued as an example of an unethical psychology experiment, and the harm inflicted on the participants in this and other experiments in the post-World War II era prompted American universities to improve their ethical requirements and institutional review for human subject experiments in order to prevent them from being similarly harmed. Other researchers have found it difficult to reproduce the study, especially given those constraints. Critics have described the study as unscientific and fraudulent. In particular, Thibault Letexier has established that the guards were directly asked to behave in certain ways in order to support Zimbardo's conclusions, which were largely written in advance of the experiment. However, Letexier's article has been criticized by Zimbardo for focusing mostly on ad hominem attacks and ignoring available data that contradicts his counter-arguments. The official website of the SPE describes the experimental goal as follows, quote, "We wanted to see what the psychological effects were of becoming a prisoner or prison guard. To do this, we decided to set up a simulated prison and then carefully note the effects of this institution on the behavior of all those within its walls." End quote. A 1996 article from the Stanford News Service described the experimental goal in a more detailed way. Quote, "Zimbardo's primary reason for conducting the experiment was to focus on the power of roles, rules, symbols, group identity, and situational validation of behavior that generally would repulse ordinary individuals." Quote, "I had been conducting research for some years on de-individuation, vandalism, and dehumanization that illustrate the ease with which ordinary people could be led to engage in antisocial acts by putting them in situations where they felt anonymous, or they could perceive of other ways that made them less than human, as enemies or objects." End quote. Zimbardo told the Toronto Symposium in the summer of 1996. The study was funded by the U.S. Office of Naval Research to understand antisocial behavior, and the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps wanted to investigate conflict between military guards and prisoners. Criticism of the SPE has continued long after the experiment ended. Many researchers have critiqued Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment for its methodology, whether it meets the criteria to be a scientific experiment, and whether the guard orientation created a demand bias. After receiving approval from the university to conduct the experiment, Study participants were recruited using an ad in the Help Wanted section of the Palo Alto Times and the Stanford daily newspapers in August 1971. 75 men applied, and after screening assessments and interviews, 24 were selected to participate in a 2-week prison simulation. The applicants were predominantly white, middle class, and appeared to be psychologically stable and healthy. The group of subjects was intentionally selected to exclude those with criminal backgrounds, psychological impairments, or medical problems. In 2008, Thomas Carnahan and Sam McFarland argued that those who applied to participate in the SPE already had traits associated with abusiveness, aggression, right-wing authoritarianism, Machiavellianism, social dominance orientation, and narcissism would be high on those volunteered for a prison experiment. Further, low dispositional empathy and altruism would also be indicators of someone who would volunteer. On a random basis, half of the subjects were assigned to role of guard, 9 plus 3 potential substitutes, and half were assigned to the role of prisoner, also 9 plus 3 potential substitutes. They agreed to participate for a 7 to 14-day period for $15 per day, roughly equivalent to $108 in 2020. The day before the experiment began, small mock prison cells were set up to hold 3 prisoners each. There was a small corridor for the prison yard, a closet for a solitary confinement, and a bigger room across from the prisoners for the guards and warden. The experiment was conducted in a 35-foot section of the basement of Jordan Hall, Stanford's psychology building. The prison had 2 fabricated walls, one at the entrance and one at the cell wall to block observation. Each cell, 17 by 10 foot, was unlit and was intended to house 3 prisoners and a cot, with a mattress, sheet, and pillow for each prisoner. Prisoners were confined and were to stay in their cells and yard all day and night until the study was finished. In contrast, the guards were to stay in a different environment, separate from the prisoners. The guards were given access to special areas for rest and relaxation, were told to work in teams of 3 for 4 8-hour shifts, and were not required to stay on site after their shift. Zimbardo took on the role of the superintendent, and an undergraduate research assistant, David Jaffe, took on the role of warden. Digitized recordings available on the official SPE website were widely discussed in 2017, particularly one where Warden David Jaffe tried to influence the behavior of one of the guards by encouraging him to participate more and be more tough for the benefit of the experiment. The researchers held an orientation session for the guards the day before the experiment began, during which the guards were instructed not to harm the prisoners physically or withhold food or drink, but to maintain law and order. The researchers provided the guards with wooden batons to establish their status, de-individuated clothing, similar to that of an actual prison guard, khaki shirt and pants from a local military supply store, and mirrored sunglasses to prevent eye contact and create anonymity. Based on recordings from the experiment, guards were instructed by the researchers to refer to prisoners by number rather than by name. This, according to Zimbardo, was intended to diminish the prisoners' individuality. With no control, prisoners learned they had little effect on what happened to them, ultimately causing them to stop responding and give up. Zimbardo has explained that guard orientations in the prison system instructed the guards to exert power over the prisoners. Further, Zimbardo asserts that his fellow research implicitly instructed the guards not to physically inflict harm on the prisoners, but at the same time, make the prisoners feel that they were in an actual prison. Quote, asking a person role-playing a guard in a prison simulation to be firm and in the action is mild compared to the pressure exerted by actual wardens and superior officers in real-life prison and military settings, where guards failing to participate fully can face disciplinary hearings, demotion, or dismissal. End quote. The study was criticized in 2012 for demand characteristics by psychologist Peter Gray, who argued that participants in psychological experiments are more likely to do what they believe the researchers want them to do, and specifically in the case of SPE, quote, to act out their stereotyped views of what prisoners and guards do, end quote. In 1975, Ali Banuazizi and Siamak Movahedi argued that the behavior of the participants in the SPE was a result of demand characteristics and not the prison environment, that there is no single definition of prisoner behavior, and that participants were simply acting in the role in which they had been cast. In 2013, Peter Gray, researcher, textbook writer, and editor, stipulated demand characteristics. Participants guessing which behavior researchers want. Influenced the SPE significantly. Guards' behaviors were implicitly condoned as neither Zimbardo nor his research assistants intervened. They argued that Zimbardo did not, quote, like to party, end quote, and conducted his experiment to explore how situations influence behaviors, but rather, he wanted to demonstrate that prison guards are already abusive and prisoners are already submissive. In 2018, Thibault Letexier, a French researcher, in his book, The History of a Lie, questions the scientific validity and merit of the SPE. He further discussed his critiques in an article published by the APA in 2019. Letexier asserts his arguments using testimonies of those participants who were assigned as guards. In his opinion, the sadism and submission displayed in the SPE was directly caused by Zimbardo's instructions to the guards, and the guards' desire to please the researchers. In particular, he has established that the guards were directly asked to behave in certain ways in order to support Zimbardo's conclusions, which were largely written in advance of the experiment. However, Letexier's article has been heavily criticized by Zimbardo and colleagues for focusing mostly on ad hominem attacks and ignoring available data that contradicts his counter-arguments. In 2020, Dutch historian Rutger Bregman claimed the experiment to be dubious. He states that the guards were urged to act aggressively towards the prisoners. In his book, Humankind, A Hopeful History, he is of the opinion that in similar experiments, researchers set up the experiments to create hostility between groups, and then interpret the finding to suit their needs. David Eshelman, aka John Wayne, acknowledges that his theater background lent itself well to his role as guard, that he purposefully thought of new ways to demean the prisoners. On one shift, Eshelman instructed the prisoners to simulate sodomy. Zimbardo has responded to this argument by stating that the other guards acted similarly or engaged with Eshelman in the treatment of prisoners. While it is possible that one guard adopted his behavior from a movie Eshelman identified with the warden in Coal Hand Luke, others did not, and more importantly, guards on a different shift than Eshelman exacted similar acts of emotional and mental brutality. Zimbardo further argues that the behaviors of the participant guards were not unlike those of real-world prisoner atrocities or the actions taken by American soldiers in the Abu Ghraib prison. Most of the guards have stated since the SPE that they were intentionally acting. The Stanford Prison Experiment BBC Prison Study has pointed to the importance of leadership of the form displayed by Zimbardo when briefing guards in the Stanford experiment in the emergence of tyranny. One positive result of the study is that it has altered the way U.S. prisons are run. For example, juveniles accused of federal crime are no longer housed before trial with adult prisoners due to the risk of violence against them. Zimbardo submitted a statement to the 1971 U.S. House Committee on the Judiciary about the experiment's findings. When acts of prisoner torture and abuse at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq were publicized in March 2004, Zimbardo was struck by the similarity with his own experiment. He was dismayed by official military and government representatives shifting the blame for the torture and abuses in the Abu Ghraib American military prison onto, quote, a few bad apples, end quote, rather than acknowledging the possibly systemic problems of a formally established military incarceration system. Zimbardo was then quoted saying, quote, I argue that we all have the capacity for love and evil, to be Mother Teresa, to be Hitler or Saddam Hussein. It's the situation that brings that out, end quote. Eventually, Zimbardo became involved with the defense team of the lawyers representing one of the Abu Ghraib prison guards, Staff Sergeant Ivan Chip Frederick. Zimbardo was granted full access to all investigation and background reports, and he testified as an expert witness in Frederick's court-martial. The trial resulted in an 8-year prison sentence for Frederick in 2004. Zimbardo drew from his participation in the Frederick case to write his book, The Lucifer Effect, Understanding How Good People Turn Evil, which deals with the similarities between his own Stanford prison experiment and the Abu Ghraib abuses.
you're never gonna make it. You're not good enough, there's a million other people with the same stuff. You really think you're different? Man, you must be kidding. Think you're gonna hit it, but you just don't get it. It's impossible, it's not probable, you're irresponsible. Too many obstacles, you gotta stop it, yo. You gotta take it slow, you can't be a pro, don't waste your time no more. Who the fuck are you to tell me what to do? I don't give a damn if you say you disapprove. I'm gonna make my move, I'm gonna make it soon, and I'll do it cause it's what I wanna fucking do. Cause all these opinions and all these positions, they come in millions, they blocking your vision. But no, you can't listen, that shit is all fiction. Cause you hold the power as long as you're driven.
Make it. There's no way that you make it. And maybe you could fake it, but you're never gonna make it. Are you just gonna take that? Make them take it all back. Don't tell me you believe that. Are you just gonna take that? Or will you fucking fight back? Or will you fucking fight back?
You ain't never ever gonna break it. You can never beat them and they're better than you face it. Thinking that they give a damn, you're not thinking straight, kid. No, they don't give a damn, you got what I'm saying? I'm not fucking playing, I'll give it to you straight, man. There's too many others and you're not that great, man. Stop what you're saying, stop what you're making. Everybody here knows that you just faking. Nah, I don't wanna hear it anymore, I don't wanna hear it anymore. All these fucking thoughts, they are not what I need anymore. I'm about to shut the motherfucking door on all you poor ass haters with your heads in the clouds, talking out loud so proud. You better shut your goddamn mouth before I do more speak out. It's about to head south.
Never gonna make it. There's no way that you make it. And maybe you could fake it, but you're never gonna make it. Are you just gonna take that? Make them take it all back. Don't tell me you believe that. Are you just gonna take that? Or will you fucking fight back? Fight back.